Live from Hollywood, Robert Patrick.
Hello. I'm going to sing a few songs from my pictures, a few songs I did for records, and a few songs Bert Bacharach wrote for me. Hi. I'm going to talk about the bad things that happened to me in 30 years of theater. Is this on?
Is
this on?
Yes, it is.
Including the bad things I did to myself, and including some bad things that were funny. I'm also going to sing 3 songs. When I've sung the third one, it is over. I've been told that we need a break in the show. So I will tell you about the 60s and 70s, and then I will tell you about the 80s and 90s. Because I know there are some people here who don't remember the 60s and 70s. And I happen to know there are a few here who don't remember the 80s and 90s. Okay. The first bad thing that happened to me was getting into theater. Where I felt I never actually belonged. That I should have been a librarian somewhere. I have now become one, a sort of librarian of Cappuccino history. But I learned all I knew about theater in one summer in Kennebunkport Playhouse. Before then, I had been in a junior high school show, a high school show, and a college show, where I did not really learn anything, which was my fault because I was so stupid and unteachable. In summer stock, where they not only did theater, but everyone slept with me, I paid a great deal of attention. And I learned a great deal about theater. I stopped off in New York on my way back to my home in New Mexico to see a friend. He was not home, it being a work day. I left my baggage with his landlady and asked her where Greenwich Village was, where the artists were. I went into a subway and got out at Sheridan Square and followed a boy down Cornelia Street. The first bad thing that happened to me was that the boy, Johnny Dodd, had been followed some time earlier by a man named Michael Smith, who had won his affections. So that was the first bad thing. But Johnny became a great friend, as did Michael. And I was at the Chino, where many people here were too. I don't need to tell anyone how wonderful it was. The people who were there know. The people who have been to other Coffee House Chronicles have been told. Very few bad things happened to me at the Chino. Not everybody I wanted to sleep with me slept with me. That really was almost the worst thing that happened. A sort of bad thing that happened. And I'm hoping these bad stories reflect all the great good that happened around them. I was doorman at the Chino. I'm very proud to be so. Jeff Weiss did a play at the Chino called A Funny Walk Home. It was a magical and terrifying play. I don't know, Clarice is here. She could tell you about it. Jeff, at one point near the end, asked the audience if they wanted him to continue. They almost always said yes, and he raped and or murdered his brother, father, and or mother. So a few nights they did it. So at any rate, it was deservedly a sensational success. I was good at cramming people into the Chino. I believe the legal occupancy was about 99. I'm sure that at times I got 250 in. People sat in the aisles, people sat on tables, people sat on people. People sat in the scene dock. We could crowd any number of people in that wanted to see it. And the Funny Walk Home was the show more people wanted to see than any other. What's more, by this time we were actually taking reservations, which was a novelty. Harry Koutoukas introduced the idea of taking reservations. One time when he was doing a play, he said, "I want real reservations like Moliere had." So I had a little clipboard as I stood up front. Jeff's show was long. It took longer to get the people in and served before it started. The reaction was vociferous. It took in other words, it ran long. It was winter. It was bitter cold and ugly outside. The second house, a big house, was in line all down Cornelia Street, shivering in the cold. The show inside went on and on. It got colder and colder. The crowd outside got uglier and uglier, when finally the door burst open and this crowd started pouring out. The next 250 started clawing past me to get in out of the cold. I was shoved in with them. I was actually had to get on the stage for some weird reason as they shoved in and out, breaking tables, knocking down lights, tearing posters off walls. I'm not kidding. Nobody stepped on the stage. So I got up on it and told them, stop it, stop it. They paid no attention. It was really getting quite violent and scary. I took my masonite clipboard and brought it down on the head of the first person passing and broke it. And I don't know if you realize how hard you have to hit someone to break masonite. The crack made everyone stop. And I said, out, out, you herd of steaming sheep. You do not deserve fine art. And I threw them out. The place was a wreck. And I stood there staring at it. And Joe Chino came wandering from behind the counter and said, you did right, Bob. You did the right thing. They're animals. They don't deserve it. The world is better without them having the chance to see beautiful, pure art like Jeff's. You did the right thing, baby. And patted me on the shoulder and went back behind the counter. I went out on the street, forced 250 random people in for the next show, and it went on time. The bad, you see, sometimes very good things came out of the very bad. A very bad thing that happened at the Chino. The longest running, not the longest running, second longest running show at the Chino was Dames at Sea. I'm sure you all know the famous musical. It was exquisite at the Chino. Bob Dahdah, did Bob come? Bob is ill. Yeah, Bob is ill. Director, actor Bob Dahdah, who started shows at the Chino. The earliest known photo of a play produced at the Chino is December 1958. Despite all the books that say they started in 1960, I got photographic proof from Bob Dahdah. Bob basically made the Chino a place where plays were regularly performed. Anyway, Bob directed Dames at Sea. The script had been considered unworkable. It was 3 years old. It had been peddled everywhere. No one would do it. Bob came across it, saw a way to do it with 5 people on a bare stage, summoned the authors and librettists and lyricists to Chino, did it with 6 people, brilliantly. It played and played and played and played and played, made the star of Bernadette Peters, made the show famous, guaranteed the productions worldwide and the fame of the play and Bernadette. When they left the Chino with it, not only did the bastards not take Bob Dahdah to direct it, the Chino is not included as the place where the play was first done in the published version. When I asked the author why that was so, he said, we couldn't afford to be associated with a place known for homosexuality and drugs, Bob. Now, who's your handsome friend and would you like some hash? I am not making this up. The leaving Bob and the Chino out of Dames at Sea success was...
Yay! Thank you.
Bob Dahdah will never tell you the story himself. And he's probably mad at me for telling it. But the betrayal of Bob and the Chino by the Dames at Sea crowd was the near rock bottom of my experience there. In future years, this specter haunted the Chino. John P. Dodd, whom most people agree was one of the 3 greatest artists ever to work off Broadway. I've had quarrels with Doric, and I've heard Doric have quarrels with other people. It's a toss-up between Jeff Weiss, John P. Dodd, and Joe Pichette. As to which was actually the finest artist ever to work off Broadway, but certainly Johnny was one of them. Late in his life, Johnny Dodd told me, Bob, the reason I've never worked at the Public Theater is that Joe Papp's wife won't hire anyone who worked at the Chino. She's sure we're all junkies and child molesters. And this specter haunted people to the Chino unjustly. just because there were some drugs at the Chino. There were drugs everywhere. The Chino did shows about drugs. You know, I mean, it was honest. And paid for that honesty. Was it Wilde who said no good deed goes unpunished? I think it's time. No, one more thing. Joe's death was, of course, the worst thing that ever happened at the Chino or anywhere ever in my life. I'm sure everybody knows the details of it. His lover had died. Some Warhol people who came and hung around the cafe got Joe into very destructive drugs. The last time I saw Joe Chino, who was standing on 6th Avenue, looking dazed out of his mind, hailing down a cab to go to one of several speed doctors he was seeing uptown. That night he came back downtown and one of the Warhol people slipped him acid without telling him. And he killed himself on the stage at the Chino. David Starkweather and Bill Hoffman and I cleaned the blood up, and the show went on that night as usual. A bad thing that happened to me from that was that I incurred a certain amount of contempt from the Chino regulars, all of whom had been there long before I came. Kenny Burgess, Tommy Garland, Charles Stanley, other people who worked there, because I insisted the show go on that night, and Joe had left me as manager. They despise what they call my Ruby Keeler attitude, but I cannot believe Joe would not have wanted it to go on. So it did. Excuse me. Somewhat futilely, in fact, because so many mourners poured into the Chino that they actually began to overlap onto the stage. And Neil Flanagan, who was having trouble enough doing a play about a suicidal queen that night anyway, The Madness of Lady Bride, gave up. It was one of only 2 shows I know that were ever canceled at the Chino. The other was a performance of my first play, The Haunted Host, because there was a fire next door and the place filled with smoke. Oh, about bad things that happened to me. I lived with most of the playwrights at the Chino before it even occurred to me that a simple bumpkin from the country like me could write a play. I wrote one. It was called The Haunted Host. And I brought it in to Joe one day and said, Joe, I wrote a play, you should do it. He, without looking, he threw it over his corner onto a garbage can. Excuse me. And said, Bob, you don't want to be a playwright. Playwrights are terrible people. You're a good guy. You pull your weight around here. Playwrights are vain and egotistic. You'll thank me someday. I said, oh, all right. However, 3 star playwrighs of Off-Off-Road at the time happened to be present. Lanford Wilson, Tom Ian, and David Starkweather. And they stamped their feet and said, Joe, you should do Bob's little play. He works hard around here. Lanford, by the way, was living with me at the time and had read the play, so he was taking no chances. But it was very brave of Tom and David, because the 3 of them said spontaneously that if Joe didn't do my play, they would do no more plays there. Which was really, considering that it was the crown jewel of Off-Off-Broadway, it was very fine of them. So Joe said, oh, all right, but you'll be sorry. And indeed, he did the play, and I'm happy to say it was one of his favorites. He was thinking of reviving it at the time he was dead. And I became a terrible person. So that's a bad thing. After Joe's death, the saddest thing that happened was that some people, and I guess this is where the reputation of the Chino as being universally a drug-riddle place came from. Some people had gotten, during the Warhol people's stay there, into pretty bad drug habits. And it was reflected in the shows and the condition of the place. And I'm afraid I was taken right along. I'm very lucky. I never got addicted to anything. Somebody said I had so much manic energy. It was years before I knew the people around me were taking speed, and they all thought I was taking it, and it was just selfish, keeping my source hidden. But I did get into it, and perhaps I just burned it up fast. I never got hooked. But things got pretty bad. But the only specific bad thing that happened after Joe's death was Charles Stanley, a wonderful actor named Charles Stanley, took over management of the Chino with the permission of Joe Chino's family. And we did a great season, by the way. You have only to look it up. It's amazing. I mean, things were going very well. But Charles, one day, brought in this strange little creature, a rather embryonic-looking little creature. She was rather fetid and wobbly and quite tiny. And rather repellent, actually, I'm sorry to say. He said, this is Valerie Solanas, and she has written a marvelous play. And he handed me a play called Scum, which was short for Society to Cut Up Men. It's all very famous now because of the movie I shot Andy Warhol. And he said, Bob, I want you to direct it. I said, why don't you direct it, Charlie? He said, no, I think you have the right style for this. So I read it, and I'm afraid I was blind to its virtues. I just didn't see it. I mean, Joe had not been dead long. I didn't want to do a play about it's a pretty repellent play. It's probably pretty good and strong. I wasn't able to see that at the time, and I refused to do it. She took it elsewhere. The bad thing about that is, one, Charles was very angry at me, and two, Miss Solanas shot Andy Warhol for not doing it, for not doing that play. And I sometimes think, it's probably pretty vainglorious on me, I might have saved Andy Warhol's life. For he later died of complications from those wounds. On the other hand, she might have shot me, and I'm probably lucky she did. Anyway, thank you. Anyway, that was a bad thing. I am, however, going to inflict upon you a song about the good things. This is very long, so be very patient. I think some of the people are here. My heart will always be in Cafe Chino. My heart will always see the Cafe Chino. Since you and I were we in Cafe Chino, my heart will always be in Cafe Chino. There I tarry day and night, seeing shows by Johnny's light, Flanagan as Lady Bright, Heide's bed in existential black and white, Koutoukas gave us Charles Stanley as Medea, mad and manly. Ian drove us all bananas, looking up that skirt of Hannah's. Milligan adored Geneso, but the posters could not say so. Kenny Burgess so designed them, only those who cared could find them. When Lance Wilson got too bitter, Maggie Dominic spread glitter. With great names the list is peppered, John Ware, Jeffrey Weiss, Sam Shepard. Alan James had Slim and Rosie, lads read Wiles' love poems to Bosie. Doric Wilson took such chances, with a gay play now she dances. Ron Link, Tom O'Horgan, oh so versatile and virtuoso. Jimmy Waring, John McDowell, Michael Maxey, Warren Powell. Audiences too were star minds, Forney's, Cornfell, and Al Carmine's. Harris's were never scariest, Walter Jane and George Ted, Judith Gale Harris. Michael Smith was sympathetic, so were Joyce and Gordon Trettick. And there was no friend to true art, loyaler than Ellen Stewart. Hope Stansberry, Rara of Avis, Helen Hampton, Stephen Davis, Charles Loubier, Joe Davies, Dames at Seasby, Spangled Navies, dark and glowering Matt Baylor, Tanya Berezin was paler. Memory will surely bar us from forgetting Don Cavaras. Playwrights stretched into infinity, Sally Ordway, Edith, Laurie, and Rose Kennedy. Also worth remarking are Wally Androchuk and Roberta Sklar, Zita Litvinos and Mary Warrenoff, so sexy, scary Ron Tavel, and corresponding Sora Ingenue and Ondine. Phoebe Ray did Joseph Bush's, French Grace so outre and luscious. Many names from memory may slip, not Hal Borsky or Bill Hayslip, nor so many on the playing field, Robert Shields and Dr. Cranefield, not forgetting Donald Brooks, who suggested comic books. Boys who glow in any era, Selmar Waldron, Bob Kubera. Girls as fair as those by Gauguin, Jeannie Lance and Lucy, Sylvain, Renee Mogan, Tommy Garland, Joe's Love Johnny, Daniel Hayden, Clark, and Connie. Names that still give me a thrill, men. Linda Escanes, John Gilman. Joe's Improbable Pinata gave us stars like Robert Dahdah. History will not uncoil and act to equal Mary Boylan. Debbie Liso Botticelli, Eddie Barton, Raffaelli, Countess Ruth, and ancient Roman, all the gang in Wonder Woman. Let us sing out all together, Hoffman, Foster, and Starkweather, Clarice Nelson, Marshall Mason, every day a holiday sun. Through the streets I scampered gaily, handing out show leaflets daily, proud to have all history know I was doorman at the Chino. When I brought the haunted host in, Chino gave me such a roastin', said that the applause and honors made all dramatists piranhas, but he let me hear some laughter, which became my life thereafter, and I owe it all, as we know, to the magic man Joe Chino. When Miss Colton and Miss Charba caught a boat to New York Harbor, they spread off Broadway's trousseau. Coffee Chronicles now will do so. So, the world will always see the Cafe Chino. So there will always be the Cafe Chino. Since you and I were we in Cafe Chino, my heart will always be in Cafe Chino. I'm certain Richard Smithies, whom I see in the audience, who played in Ionesco and O'Neill and other things that you know, wonders why he isn't in the song. Smithies doesn't rhyme with anything. Except in Middle English, like withies. And how was I going to get withies into a point? Hi, Richard. Okay, that's the long song. Alrighty. Now, as everyone knows, eventually the Chino closed. Nobody's fault. Nobody's fault at all. There was a lot of blame at the time, and none of it placed correctly. Without Joe, the Chino was just a theater, and because of the inspiration of the Chino, there were now 300 other off-Broadway theaters to work at, many of them better equipped and a lot easier to work at, and the Chino closed. I did a bad thing to myself. A Chino director named Andy Milligan, whom you now know as the famous worldwide cult director of gore movies that they used to be called exploitation movies, and he's really world famous now. Also directed for the stage. And he got a date at a new place across town, practically the first other off-Broadway theater besides the Chino. And he asked me, and I was very flattered because nobody thought anything of me, if I would write a dramatic version of Tennessee Williams' play, short story, One Arm. And I said, sure, for I love the story. But then he described what he wanted, and it seemed to be so vulgar and gross and coarse that prissy little me wouldn't have anything to do with it. So I missed the chance to be the first writer to write an original play for the Café La Maman, which I always regretted. I've written much dirtier plays since. But I did, of course, get to meet Ellen Stewart, who unfortunately can't be with us today. She's right next door. We could all go over there. Ellen, I'm sure most of you know her. For those few of you who don't, Ellen is a brilliant, visionary, determined visionary. Visionaries are magical people. They make most of the things in the world happen. They can also be very difficult. And one of the problems with visionaries is they see what's ahead so clearly. And they sometimes are impatient with people who don't see the same future ahead that they do. And many people expect Ellen Stewart to be superhuman and have no personal emotions, and no emotions or opinions based on when she was born and where she came from and how she was raised. There may be a lot more tolerant of themselves than they've been of Ellen. I'll leave it at that. I had very few bad experiences at La Mama. And one reason is there were 2 years I didn't go to La Mama. And the first bad experience, Neil Flanagan got a date at La Mama and asked me if I had a play. I gave him the top play on my pile, which happened to be a realistic play about a couple settling the West. It was done on a double bill with a play from the Open Theater, an extremely avant-garde, abstract, existential play, all movement and sound and no visible coherence. That double bill signaled a dreadful, unnecessary split that was happening off Broadway. You might call it between the traditional and avant-garde. Some people felt there should be no realistic or naturalistic or understandable plays done off Broadway. Others, like myself, felt that I never saw a distinction. I always felt that all plays used the same elements, just in different proportions. If I wrote a realistic play, I was using sound, music, movement, color, just as a totally avant-garde orchestra of flesh play by Tom O'Horgan or Joe Chaikin did. I never saw a conflict. Most intelligent people didn't. But there was a hardcore of style fanatics who caused something of a rant in the off-off community. I always thought it was unnecessary. I know Tom O'Horgan, who was the most avant-garde director in the world, used to come see my so-called realistic plays and love them. And that realistic artists like Lanford Wilson and Marshall Mason were always running into the Chino saying, oh, you've got to go see this or that fantastic avant-garde play. Real people didn't see a conflict. Tacky people, some of whom unfortunately had newspaper columns, caused a division. Caused divisions, and sometimes things that were said by newspaper columnists preferring one sort of play to another were taken by the people involved as if each other had said them. There were enmities that were unpleasant to be around because I liked everybody. And I liked seeing everybody and didn't like it when my friends hated each other's guts. The one bad thing that happened to me at La Mama, I was waiting tables there in 1965. And some of you out there may remember that in 1965, the New York Times suddenly decided to discover off Broadway, and there were reporters and photographers and reporters everywhere you turned. You know, sometimes whole audiences seemed to be made up of nothing but people from the Times. And they were everywhere, and they didn't really know anything. And they were trying to find out things and getting very confused. And it happened that that night there was a lady from the Times at La Mama. And I was at the counter getting an order filled, and right behind me, the lady from the Times asked someone in charge at La Mama, said, oh, by the way, I've been told I must get a picture of this playwright, Robert Patrick. And I was about to say, oh, I'm here. I certainly never expected to be included in this. I was nobody. And then this person at La Mama said, oh, you don't want any pictures of him or anybody connected with that Cafe Chino place. It's all just a bunch of homosexual drug addicts. And I put down my tray and took off my apron and walked out of La Mama for 2 years. That was very bad. I really hated hearing that. It has a sort of happy ending. One night, there was a knock on the door of the flat I shared with a couple of roommates, and it was the Times, a reporter and a photographer. My roommates were impressed as hell. I wasn't. I thought they were just taking everybody. They posed me, got my picture, and I forgot about it. A couple of weeks later, I was walking along Christopher Street, actually, across from the old Women's House of Detention, and I ran into David Starkweather. At the time, a very prominent off-Broadway playwright. He was reading the paper, and I said, hi, David, what's in the paper? He threw the newspaper at me and said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. So I opened up the New York Times Magazine, and there was this big article on off-Broadway called The Pass the Hat of Theater Circuit. The whole thing was very condescending about all of us doing theater for free. You know, there were a lot of pictures in it, but there were only 3 pictures of individuals: Joe Chino, Sam Shepard, and me. And Sam and I were by no means the preeminent playwrights of off-Broadway at the time. That would have been Lanford Wilson and Paul Foster, hands down. If you saw the photos, you'd see why I say that the only reason they printed our pictures was we looked seedy, dissolute, and wasted. And I'm sure that was their opinion of people who worked for free, and that's why we're in it. I thought this was funny. I thought David's anger was ridiculous. I took the paper over to the Chino, and I opened the door, and all I saw was white. Everyone was reading the paper. And I walked through the house, and everybody was turning their backs on me. And I got to the counter where even Joe was reading the thing. I said, Joe, did you see this? He said, Bob, you shouldn't have come here. This is very bad. You shouldn't have done this, and you should stay away for a while. And I'm like, I'm sorry, my editorship at the Times isn't meeting with your approval. So that caused really bad feeling. Now, this was a surprise to me because, frankly, I was so happy to be at the Cappuccino in La Mama and off Broadway. I had never had a trace of an idea of going elsewhere, moving on, having a career. It just had never occurred to me. I thought everybody off Broadway was happy where they were, working office jobs by day, being underground theater stars at night. I honestly, well, obviously I was, there were a lot of people who felt differently and to whom this publicity break in the Times was a major event. I was so hurt by people's reaction that a few weeks later, when Life magazine came down to take pictures of the playwrights on a rooftop across from the Chino, Bob Heide remembers, Terry was there. Was Clarice here? She was there. I refused to go. I said, okay, they want their silly publicity, let them have it. I deeply regret it now. I have that photo, and I would love to see my own face there, young and pretty, among my friends when they were young and pretty and alive. You know, so the bad thing that happened to all of that was, out of hurt pride, I'm not in that wonderful photo with my friends. And that pretty much covers the Chino. At La Mama, very few bad things happened to me at La Mama. That was really the worst, hearing that off the remark. I trickled back to La Mama. I helped Paul Foster organize a big benefit for La Mama when it needed it, which helped a lot of people see us as a movement. 29 very different plays by 29 very different playwrights, all of them pretty brilliant, and really helped coalesce people's idea that this was a movement, a uniquely American art movement, by the way. There was no manifesto, no set of rules, no proclamation of purpose or principles. You know, like Joe Chino told us, we did what we had to do. And like Ellen Stewart showed us, we kept doing it in spite of fantastic obstacles. Anyway, that was a very good experience, the main benefit. That's really about all the bad La Mama experiences. Just a moment. Well, except petty ones. I'm going to take the small ones too. Once Ellen called me and said that Johnny Dodd, the lighting genius, had put up a light show with some actors doing some movement, but it really needed some text. And Johnny agreed, so I wrote a few brief texts for it, and even was in it. And I was very pleased because one of the actors in it was Charles Stanley, and I wrote him a wonderful speech. And Charles so resented a writer being brought in to what he thought of as an actor's showcase that he whispered my speech. lest the words upstage him. Well, he got paid back pretty fast. Lucy Sylvain upstaged him incontrovertibly. Lucy was then a new mother, and she was doing a nude dance. And during her dance, she would go down and spray her milk on the front row. Upstage that, Charles. Okay. I'm just looking to see if there are any other bad La Mama experiences. Not really. I had a good relationship with Ellen all the way. Ellen, I liked doing lots of shows. Hi.
Bob, you forgot. When we did Hello from Bertha, Chino, by Tennessee Williams, and it won the Coffee Cup Award from backstage. Gwen Van Damme, she's here.
Yes!
Who was in it.
Yes.
And she was marvelous.
Yes. Gwen Van Damme. Our Bertha.
The other thing that came from it was that the man who was at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts saw it and gave me a job teaching at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts.
A paying job?
Paying job for 1 year.
Bob Dahdah. You took money for art? Didn't you feel like a whore? No, I really think that's about all bad that ever happened to me at La Mama. Isn't that lucky? So now I'm going to sing you the La Mama song. Okay, it's shorter. I'll try to start at a lower key. In a tiny basement, out of grace and self-effacement, Ellen made La Mama, etc. She made it for the playwright, not dictating what we may write. So we played La Mama, etc. But the cops misunderstood her, couldn't comprehend what could hurt. draw for all us hungry young men be. So she moved us to a loft then, capable as Laura Croft then, where her artist spoke unbrokenly. She, in all her appearings, in stretch pants and big hoop earrings, shows announced which trounced propriety. A female A-bomb at La Mama, etc. She took all us post-teeners to a nook above a cleaners for a new La Mama, etc. Where, ignorant what art meant, landlords and the fire department chose to close La Mama, etc. But no one dilly-dallied. 30 dirty playwrights rallied with a benefit that made us see that we had become a movement, entertainment and improvement for a sad and sick society. Sure, some of us got famous, but back then no one would claim us but Joe Chino and Her Majesty, the lady we know as the Mama, etc. Then, gathering resources and her legendary forces, Ellen sent a show across the sea. Tom Paine was its title, virile, vehement, and vital. Europe saw that tour and said, wee wee. Careless what it cost her, Tom O'Horgan and Paul Foster were unfurled to set world drama free. So, European artists all turned into avant-gardists, then in a direct trajectory. Now folks from every birthplace send their plays back to the birthplace of theater, fabulous and free. What shows the world owes to La Mama, etc. Mama. Sorry I got out of my key there. It's really quite pretty when I managed to sing right the key. Okay, now some random horror stories to finish out the 70s. They're not all horror stories, but just bad things that happened. I had my first commercial play, my first commercial production, show that was done at the Chino, Camera Obscura. This benefit we did was called Bang. And I made playwrights write, or drag out of the doors, 29 short plays. And we called them mini plays, right? Well, a theater in California decided to do an evening of such mini plays called Collision Course. Lanford Wilson and Sam Shepard and other well-known playwrights who were in it all told them they must do a play by me because I invented the mini play. So they called me and said, we're rehearsing around the corner, bring a play. So I had the one I grabbed happened to be Camera Obscura. It went very well in the production, and then it was published, and I suddenly was making my living playwriting and didn't have to work in offices anymore. I wish Joe had been around to see that happen. However, it was my first, some of the playwrights that were in Collision Course, it was my first time to meet them, and I was very happy. People like Terrence McNally, Israel Horowitz. I can't even remember who all was in it. All people became great names afterwards. And I invited them all to come see a production of a play of mine that was going on at the time. Now, I had not had any time to be around this production, you understand. Somebody else was directing it, and I was going to go run follow spot for it opening night. So a lot of these playwrights whose respect I wanted so badly came to see it. And I was up in the follow spot booth, so I couldn't even do anything as the worst production any human being ever had unfolded on stage. Just to give you a sample, the stage of the 13th Street Theater is slightly raked, so the audience sees the floor. During the first scene of the play, a water bug the size of a water buffalo skittered across the stage. One of the actors, rather than just letting it skitter off, stepped on it for the remainder of the first act. At the end of the first scene, that character walked off and slammed the door. The set had been so flimsily constructed that when he slammed the door over here, a wall over here began to fall on the roof. who stared at it hypnotized. By sheer fortune, there was a window in it which fit right over. It was difficult for the show to proceed on the proper level of satire after that. Helen Hapt climbed in a window with a whip to beg the hero to whip her. She couldn't get the window open. Well, fortunately, there was no glass in it, so she just climbed through it. She went to snap her whip, and it snapped off of its handle. Somehow they got through the first act, hoping that the big confrontation scene between the hero and the evil king of a foreign country over dinner in the second act would save the show. There was to be a long table at each end of which one was the hero and one the villain, right? Very dramatic confrontation in polite circumstances. A surefire scene. Unfortunately, the director thought that if he put a little table like this at one end of the table and another little table at that end and stretched a sheet between them, it would serve as the table, which it did for about 1 minute, till one of the actors let go of it, and the dinner slowly began to sag to the ground. At this point, Terrence McNally and Israel Horovitz were using each other's hair to wipe their tears off. And I fear that my reputation among those whom I would have as my peers suffered probably irreparably from that experience. Okay, that was bad. Another interesting experience of the 60s, in 1969, The Haunted Host went on, and I was blessed with Neil Flanagan and Joe Pichette in one play, Dreamcast. It was a lovely production. It didn't last long because the people who rented us the theater didn't tell us they were going to rent the basement to a tap dance show simultaneously. When we tried to sue about this, we discovered we couldn't because they didn't actually own the theater. It was deserted and they had broken in and skipped town at the rent and everything disappeared. But it was a nice memory anyway. However, my friend Bobby Kubera, who's dead now, Bobby was one of the most beautiful boys in New York and was making it pay, shall we say. He thought that I should make some money too, so he offered to take me to a party with the rich men that he knew. And we went, dressed perhaps a little more outre than people in the East 50s were used to. As Bobby said afterwards, I guess the 60s haven't reached the 50s. So we went in to peddle it, as it were, among the rich men. And they were not sure even that we were gay. There was a uniform gay people were supposed to wear in that world, and we weren't wearing it. So these quite polite, educated, rich men were very nervous to be gay with two guys there who may not be gay, right? So they started feeling us out, as it was called in those days, trying to get us to, as it were, drop a hairpin. Now, Bobby and I, who were so relaxed about being gay that it was actually comical, had no idea what they were doing, you know. So this one man came over and said, I understand you're in the theater in some way. I said, yes, I am. He said, I saw just one interesting play. I said, oh? He said, yes, it was called The Haunted Host. He was going, obviously, to lead into telling me that it was about a gay man, and how did I feel about that? I said, oh, I wrote it. They had us thrown out. Not because we might be straight, because they were sure we were insane. Because nobody with hair that came down to here could conceivably actually be a playwright. Bob, Heide, and John Gilman are here, are they not?
Yeah.
Bob and John and I had an interesting hair experience. People wonder why we wore long hair in the 60s. You know, why was that? Well, it started by accident. We were poor. And skipping a haircut meant we could see another movie or have another meal. And besides, we all thought it was sort of raffish and bohemian because, you know, long hair had been intellectual in the 1800s in Vienna. And, you know, so it was kind of fun. But then we began to discover that, for instance, if we went into a store to buy cigarettes with hair just below our earlobes, we wouldn't get served. And if we protested, we'd be told, get out, get a haircut. Seriously, you know, I was like, what? A quarter inch of hair makes you social outcast? Well, yes, it did. And we discovered the longer you grew it, the more you learned about society. And it got to where people would say, oh, your plays are too critical about society. Things aren't that bad. We'd say, yeah, let your hair grow. And that is how long hair became associated with the youth movement. However, hair of all kinds could cause you trouble. Bob, Heide, and John Gilman and I were walking along West 4th Street one time, headed for the Chino. We were right in front of that restaurant named Joe's that used to be on the corner. And suddenly, a taxi cab driver, Bob and John were rather assisted blondes at the time. And my hair was not quite as long as Prince Diane's. This man had looked at our hair and went crazy. He knocked down with his cab 2 parking meters and crashed against the lamppost, screaming, "Faggots, faggots, faggots." We stood there. You fellas remember this?
Yeah.
We stood there. Yeah, we stood there dazed. And the cops came, let him go with a warning, and told us to get our hair cut. I mean, you see what I mean? Hair told the story. It also turned out to look gorgeous on middle-class boys, but that's another story. Okay. After the Chino closed, I'm trying to get these in order. The next bad luck I had was meeting the greatest actor I ever had in a play, Joe Pichette, who was not only the greatest of actors, but perfect for my plays. The perfect instrument to carry my message to the world. That was all fine and good. That was good. The bad part was I fell in love with him. I've always fallen in love with men for their talent. It's no smarter than falling in love with them for their looks. Let me tell you. But I followed Joe to a bar called the Old Reliable Theater Tavern, where I worked for some years. Many other people from the Chino, La Mama followed me. Bob and John did shows there. Harry, I think you did a show there. Bob Dahdah, you know, I can't really see who's here, so I don't know. But lots of people here did shows over there. It became the next place, as they call it. It was great fun. Somebody, even though it was in a neighborhood where you seldom did not see a burning car, we got great crowds. It was called The Last Elizabethan Audience by one critic. And one actress who worked there, Janine O'Reilly, actress playwright, said, "Of course we get big houses here. People are afraid to come alone." But it was certainly the next place. The vitality was incredible. I think they did a show here about it, a Coffee House Chronicles, and it deserves one. But in fact, I really achieved my first real prominence doing show after show after show at the Old Reliable. It was great fun. I had Neil, Joe, many other fine actors to work with. Barbara Montgomery, Lamar Alford. June Purse, Kitty Hill. You know, that's another show. It really is. They were fantastic. But I was also going insane. I was doing too much. It's a lifelong habit, but I guess I was getting older. I was a mess between my unrequited love for Joe, which I mentioned only was a major element in my life history, and this endless labor. I know we all worked on everybody else's shows. I mean, just because I wasn't doing the show didn't mean I wasn't stage managing, doing props, and acting. But it was insane. I should tell the Candy Darling story.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about bad things that happened. I acted in a play by John Hart that he'd gotten Candy Darling to star in. Candy was a great and famous, deservedly famous drag actor. You know, he's a guy dresses girl and bad tits. Okay, but incredibly beautiful. I mean, words cannot tell you how beautiful and gracious he could be, or what a campy queen he'd turn into. He was cast in a very dignified role in this play. I was cast as his aged husband. And things went very well in rehearsal. Opening night, Candy's fans were there, and Candy did the Candy Darling show. Not speaking a line of the play. We were all just... the next night, my entrance was through the bar part of the Reliable. The next night, I thought of going on stage with him again and ordered 2 scotches. And went on drunk. And managed to take a little of the show back from Candy. And at one point, Candy started to get up to do a song. I gripped her wrist and made it clear I would break it if she didn't want to. So things got better. That was not fun. But it was clear I was going nuts. And Paul Foster, God bless him, who was rich from his play Tom Paine at the time, saw that I was going nuts and paid for a 3-week trip to Europe for me so that I could see Ramses Shafi, the Marlon Brando of Holland, do my haunted host over there. for which he didn't pay me. And I went to France to work with, we're talking about bad things that happened. You don't think only bad things happen. I went to France for a week where I worked with Jerome Savary's Magic Circus and was so happy and loved them all so much. Later, I learned that they had put a page in the program ridiculing me as a silly American coming over and trying to be avant-garde. That wasn't fun. I got to London where I expected to stay with the Le Mama Troupe. Well, guess what? They had left the day before for Hollywood to do the Futz movie. And of course, no one knew where to reach me to tell me. I found a bed for myself as best I could in London for a night. And then I called the Travers Theatre in Scotland, and they said, well, sure, Bob, come up. We need a writer anyway. So they sent me train fare, and I went up. And for 5 days, I stayed there writing a 5-person version of Dracula, my first commissioned play. And I was very pleased with how I managed to double roles meaningly and poetically and create for them a full version of Dracula with only 5 players. They were very happy, too. I didn't see any Edinburgh, Glasgow, Edinburgh. So they took me, because the only time they took me out was to eat Chinese, which is apparently what's got me. And once they took me out to see a Dracula movie. So I was very pleased, and then after I got back to America, I learned that right after I left, they'd gotten a grant. And they did a 60-person Dracula and didn't use my script at all. So that was bad. Well, I'm only telling you the bad things. Back at the Old Reliable, a very bad thing happened, which at the time caused a lot of bitterness. My last show at the Old Reliable was a double bill of a comedy and a drama, both directed by Neil Flanagan, who had, Neil was a great actor, great director, great person, great teacher. He'd always done great shows for me and with me. And this time, I guess Neil may have been deep down tired of doing it for free because he grotesquely miscast plays with people who could get him jobs, paying jobs, people from who owned theaters. And it was really embarrassing. And I had to close the shows, which caused terrible things between me and Neil, terrible things between me and the cast who did not understand how badly they were miscast, and terrible troubles between me and sweet Speedy, who owned the bar and who had always been so good to us, so appreciated our bringing customers into the shows. And it ended a lot of relationships very badly, but I could not ask my fans that I had accumulated at the bar to come down and see such very bad shows under my name. I'm sure everybody here has had some experience related to it. It was not fun. Okay. Ellen Stewart occasionally called on me, as I say, to do things for her. The only reason I didn't work steadily at La Mama all these years was I like to do a lot of shows. Ellen likes to do a lot of playwrights. If Ellen had ever wanted to give me a theater, I would have kept it full 52 weeks a year. But I fully understand her urge to help all the players from all the countries. So I did my plays here, there, and yon. You know, I was very happy working in lots of places. But when Ellen needed me, I came back. Ellen asked me to come to Waltham, Massachusetts, to stage manage a Tom O'Horgan, Megan Terry play at an international theater festival. This was in '69. Waltham had not seen Hair yet. Waltham was not ready, not only for the show, Waltham was not ready for us when we went down in town to go to Dunkin' Donuts. They had not seen, not only the show Hair, they hadn't seen Hair before. They hadn't seen beautiful French actresses in sequin jumpsuits. They hadn't seen gorgeous young German actors with 3 or 4 earrings and tattoos on their faces. We were asked not to go into town. Okay? It was like that. It was very educational for everybody. Tom O'Horgan did go into town to find the band because he liked Dunkin' Donuts. He went into Dunkin' Donuts barefoot. You all know who Tom O'Horgan is, don't you? The world's greatest avant-garde director.
Are you sure they had Dunkin' Donuts then?
Oh, yeah.
I'm sorry, it was a donut shop. Whatever. Throw her out. Tom and an innocent young actor from the show went in barefoot and were arrested. Ellen came up from New York and said, Mr. Patrick, you know these La Mama troops, they're unruly. And they're getting ready to open. And can you handle them? Can you direct them for 2 days? Because I knew what Tom was doing. I said, sure, Alan. So I went in, I went bopping into a rehearsal hall, told them, Tom's been arrested, it'll take a couple of days to get him out of jail. I'm directing. Okay, scene 5. And they looked at me like, you're... Well, you know, it worked. They respected me. I even cleared up a few things that Tom had been leaving lyrical, and it worked fine. Well, Tom approved when he came out. It was swell. It was great fun. The bad thing that happened was Megan Terry, for her intermission, wanted to have the whole audience up on stage for a banquet. So part of my job each day was going out in a truck and buying a whole bunch of stuff, cheese and fruit and wine and stuff, and setting it up backstage and shoving it on intermission. Well, this was fine, except that because of our scandalous publicity, the show sold out this huge auditorium. And everybody said, oh, they're feeding us an intermission. Came up on stage, and 800 people on stage broke $100,000 worth of hydraulic lifts. Oh. Yeah. So that was fun. Actors swinging from ropes screwed into a ceiling not built for it. The ropes broke and the actors flew over the audience and broke their legs on stage. These things kept happening. The stagehands were so contemptuous of all, because we weren't real theater people, that they were very careless of the orders I gave them as stage manager backstage. You know, they figured, we know what to do, we don't have to listen to that guy. Well, one of them cued. There was a scene that Megan had written in the play where a meat slicing machine came slowly from the back of the stage on wheels, you know, as the curtain went down, it came slowly toward the audience. Very scary, very beautiful. Well, one night as the actors were taking their bows after the show, one of the stagehands cued that machine. And he began to approach the actors from behind. I instantly ordered the curtain down. Thank God the actors were in front of the curtain, taking their bows, and ran on stage and manually unplugged the machine before it went through and cut Kevin O'Connor in half. The actors were furious because I brought the curtain down and turned out the lights before they'd taken all their bows. The manager of the theater was furious because I had broken. I ordered someone to lift the curtain, and I backed on stage as the manager of the theater followed me on stage berating me, not aware that the audience was still out there. When he finished berating me, I let loose at top volume, and honey, I cut through a 400-voice choir in college. I let through with full blast at the things they had done, including the fact that his stagehands had just about murdered an actor. And before I was through, he realized that all the good people of Waltham were listening. We had no more trouble after that. Okay. I want some applause for that one. One other thing that happened in Waltham, I don't know if we're going to get through my whole life here. One other thing that happened in Waltham, and I have to tell this story, although there may be a gentleman. Is Peter Craig here? Peter Craig objects to this story because he says that one of the things somebody says in it isn't true. So be aware the punchline isn't necessarily true, but it is the punchline too. A beautiful actor named Victor Lipari. You know, at any given moment, there's one boy off-Broadway who is the most beautiful boy. Are you all familiar with that phenomenon? Amen. Mr. Gilman over here was, when I came to the Chino, the most beautiful boy off-Broadway. There may be a couple more people out there who have been. William Hoffman certainly was. Bobby Cubero was. Stephen Davis was. You all know the phenomenon I'm talking about. I call him the golden apple. There's always a golden apple. Who?
Fred Forrest.
Oh, Fred. Yes, there's always a golden apple. Well, at one point, the golden apple was Victor Lipari. Now, the man who captures the golden apple is always assured of fame and success. That's why he's the golden apple. How are you, Mr. Heide? Paul Foster won the favors of Mr. Lipari and went on to become the best known and most influential playwright of all time. Victor was not selfish with his favors and would be first to be happy to have the world know that. Victor was in the La Mama troupe, a prominent member of it. Victor came down with hepatitis. Ellen said it was because he had bought new shoes during rehearsal. Maggie Dominic! Rehearsal. The doctor had other opinions of how he got it. And as stage manager, I had to be there, because I needed to know, did I have to replace an actor or not? So Ellen Stewart and I and the doctor were there with Victor, and the doctor very tactfully, this was 1969, said, Mr. LeParry, this is a highly contagious disease from intimate contact, and I wonder if there is anyone in your theater company who should be informed of the state of your health. And Victor looked, everyone. Peter Craig says that was unfair of him. Okay, we'll take a break now.
Here's the basket. I guess what we'll do is I'll stand over there and you'll donate. Okay? Thank you.
I'm sure some of you don't even know each other. Gwen, do you know that?
Oh, Mary Claire's here. Oh, good.
Mary Claire, on your right.
Oh, I'll come up.
All great Chino actresses. Where's he going? Doric.
Somebody behind you.
Bob Heide. John Gilman, get over here.
John.
Where's Harry?
Hi, Donald. Donald, I think people better start kneeling in front.
Where's Harry?
Move over to the microphone.
Move to the right, everybody.
Move over.
You've got to close it.
Yeah, Don, can you kneel in front?
No, you darkness.
John, can you kneel in front?
Move center stage, please. Center stage. Find the light.
Yeah, kneel.
Find the light.
Donald, come over.
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, everybody to the
This
right.
gentleman's
Everybody
not
shuttle to
even
the right.
Now everybody say shit.
Are there any other Chino people here?
Oh, I'm sorry, Doc.
Harry?
I think it's
Cigarette break.
Harry went for a break.
Well, I'd like a cigarette too.
You don't
I've got to go feed my partner.
Oh, you look great.
You say that. That's
Somebody drag Harry Koutoukas.
Where's Harry? Harry has to be here.
Judy comes in.
I want more flash. He's having emphysema.
All right, my
that
darlings,
should be
thank
enough.
you. Bob, you can sit down.
These are for the...
Give me your hand.
Bob, I must have missed you by a minute up there. Oh, Bob.
Maybe by a minute, but I sat up.
Okay.
Did I mention everybody?
Yeah, you mentioned everybody. Where's Maggie?
Honesty out is so, you know.
Would you want to sit in the front row, Bob? Or this is more comfortable.
I will get them for you. And I have
There's a big
Oh,
step.
no. Why not? Living legend.
Oh, sorry. If you sit here next to
Michael, how are you? Fine. Did I mention you? No, not yet. I will. Hi, Gary.
You were doing the bad things.
Well, that's just it. You see, it's hard to mention all my friends while I'm talking. Oh, I don't know. I know.
Maggie, come on.
I want one of these with
Excuse me, sir.
Michael McGrinder.
Oh, sorry.
Andy.
One way or the other.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Superstar.
Richard Smithies. You should be down here. We're taking pictures of Chino people.
Yeah,
Oh, my God.
Everybody pictures of people taking pictures.
Pictures.
Robert's camera.
Your right side.
Huh?
I got your camera. I'm taking pictures.
Okay. Who's that? Oh, Cindy, hi. How are you, my darling? You what lovely hair. This is Richard Smithies. Richard, even before you did, Gwen. Where's Gwen?
I dare say.
Where's Gwen?
Locascio,
Gwen, do you know Richard Smithies?
No.
Richard acted at the Chino even before you did.
Really?
Richard was in the first play that Lanford Wilson ever saw, which made Lanford want to be in theater. An Ionesco play.
Great.
Yeah. You saw that Bob Dahdah's here.
Usually, Tom will have him.
Peter, I called him this
I
morning.
know.
I left him a message.
I'd love to have heard Peter's rebuttal to my story about Victor. He called me, he was bitching me out like mad. He said,
Well, we all got
Not
the
every-
shots. We got the shots. We all got shots.
okay. Oh, I know. Would you tell him? Would you tell him that?
It wasn't a true event. I mean, we all did get shots. We all got shots. No matter what.
I'm sure Victor meant it not just from him, but by a line of... Byline of Apostolic Succession. Andrew Caldwell, I hate you. Why are you here? Andrew's my friend from Seattle. Wait till you see the pictures I have for you from the archives.
Do you need coffee or water?
Andy knows all of you people from 1,000 stories I've told, from the pictures I took on the web.
But he's so young.
This is for Andy, like coming to Canada and all that. Sure.
No. Augusto. All right.
Richard Smithies. When are you flying back?
Where are you from?
Tomorrow?
I'm from South. You make
What?
money.
Why don't you come fly with me?
Where are you
flying out of?
6:40 in the morning for Doric.
No, I talk to them every now and then because they get in my office.
Okay, don't you disagree.
I won't.
Everybody, this is Harry Koutoukas. We want lots of photos of him with me. Okay, is Chris back? Is Mike back?
Where's Chris? I just...
Boom.
We have 30 minutes. 20 years, 30 minutes.
A year a minute. Take a couple of hours.
I think I should start, right? Yes. Okay. We left off with Victor Lapari. Mary Claire Charba had a comment on that. Mary, where are you?
Well, I gotta say that I don't think he actually had relationships with everyone, but we all got shot.
Okay.
Why? I remember being carted off in a bus. Always to be shot, and I never had one of those before.
Okay, we got to finish with the 70s. We got to finish with the 70s real fast here. We may not get out of the 70s. Okay. Also, now, Mr. Terry Talley is here. Mr. Talley was a member of the Spring Street Company. And we're going to talk now about a second generation of off-Broadway and how things changed. It will sound as if I'm saying things got worse, because that's how it seemed at the time. Okay? All that happened was a new generation came in that didn't know off-Broadway hadn't always existed. And that made a big difference. Mr. Talley and some friends of his were with the Spring Street Company. They did the best physical production I've ever had of a play, My The Golden Circle, in 1972. It was brilliant. I got photos to prove it. Ellen Stewart wanted to move it to La Mama. You understand, by now, La Mama was a place that practically every month a new hit Broadway show came out of. I exaggerate, but Godspell had just opened at La Mama, and wham, world fame. This was a fantastic break for a show, right? The Spring Street Company said, we never heard of it, we don't want to move there, and we don't want to keep this set up because this is our home, and took it down. Right? I'm sure Terry and others regretted it ever since, but it was like that, you know. On the one hand was this fantastic achievement, on the other, people didn't know about it yet. And there were people coming in who had no appreciation of the scope of it, what it had cost to make it, or what it could do. And this caused a whole lot of confusion for the next decades. Tom Horgan. I have to tell the Tom Horgan story. Tom had done Hair and I think Lenny and Inner City, and was the hottest thing in the universe. They wanted him to do Jesus Christ Superstar. He didn't want to do Jesus Christ Superstar. He didn't like Jesus Christ Superstar. Tom and I had always wanted to work together. So I brought him a play called Mercy Drop. He loved it. They were all set to do it. It was just the right combination of my words and opportunities for his ebullient staging. So Paul Foster and I dropped over to Tom Horgan's loft one night to discuss production, because Paul wanted to be involved. He loved the play too. So Tom was rafting on about it, and his lover came in and said, Tom, there's a phone call I think you should take. Tom said, oh, okay. He went out. He came back in with his face gray with shock. He said, Bob, you wouldn't believe the money they just offered me to do Jesus Christ Superstar. I'm going to have to do it. So Mercy Drop didn't happen. I've never felt about that funny little gnomish man that writes that music. Also ran into a lot of other kinds of people who off-road probably had become very attractive. Okay, and I was working with kinds of people I hadn't worked with before. Not only people who were, say, a little bit middle class and didn't understand the knock-down, drag-out, nitty-gritty way we had to work, but also people who didn't know how to work at all. I finally had a production of Mercy Drop with a great cast, but I was very confused by what I saw happening in rehearsal. I thought, well, the director has some vision. They won't know until it all comes together. So came a costume parade, you know, when they were having great costumes, and on came the leading man in a terrific-looking jumpsuit. He said, I love it, but shouldn't I have a pocket for the gun? And the director said, what gun? Well, there was the climax of the play, the hero pulled a gun and killed all the other members of the cast. And the actor said, the one that I killed all the other members of the cast with. The director said, oh my God, is that what you've been doing when you wave your finger at rehearsal? That's disgusting. You can't put that on. We'll cut that scene. So I had to postpone the show and fire him and redirect it. But, you know, believe me, as a playwright, you never want to hear a director the day before opening say, what gun? I recall another director whose classic phrase was, what bedroom door? Okay, so it was like that. The kinds of people that were to work with were changing. I went to work in a lot of places. I worked in the theater in Chicago that went wonderful for a gay theater, the longest lasting gay theater in the country. And then I discovered that the money I'd been giving them to pay for advertising for the shows, they had stolen. That was the first time that happened to me, that I ran into financially dishonest people in off-Broadway type theater. Again, I was terribly naive. I didn't think people would go into off-Broadway who weren't kind, wise, loving, and honest. You know? It was a bit of a shock. I guess I'd better jump to Kennedy's Children. I ran La Mama Hollywood for Ellen until, oh, thank God, you're still the prettiest boy off Broadway, John. I ran La Mama Hollywood for Ellen until I just became so depressed from working with two kinds of people. One was people who did avant-garde plays in hopes of getting jobs in commercials and who acted in them that way. And the other was a young actor from New York I brought out and decided to be in love with, who wasn't in love with me. Got tired of working with that kind of people. Just at that moment, somebody in England said they wanted to do a play of mine called Kennedy's Children, which every theater in the world had turned down. I mean, in the world. The guy had been trying to peddle it all over Europe as well as America. No one would touch it. And then this bankrupt pub in a slum in London that was going to have to close anyway said, we might as well close with a play we like. But they didn't think anybody else would like it or come, so you know, that's why they were doing the closing. They did scrape up enough money to bring me over. Okay. The morning after it opened, I signed contracts for the play to be produced in 60 languages. It was a big worldwide hit. I was suddenly in a whole other world. I had money, I had fame, I had a little power. I brought Joe Pichette and this other actor over to London to play in The Haunted Host for two reasons. One is they were the best conceivable cast for the show, as the London critics agreed. The other was I hoped my new fame and power would make one of them fall in love with me. They fell in love with each other. I will not be hypocritical enough to say I couldn't blame them. That was a bad thing that happened at this time when supposedly everything was good. I went down to Cape Town to direct the play. All my friends in England criticized me for going to work in a fascist country. I said, if you're talking about the race thing, honey, I'm from Texas. I mean, where I grew up, if there were places for blacks to drink, they were labeled colored only. I mean, I knew from race prejudice, okay? The main thing was there were no blacks where I lived because they wouldn't let blacks live in towns that I lived in. I knew about that. That was no surprise to me. What was a surprise to me about South Africa was the police state aspect of it. That people were actually afraid to talk about things because their maid or their husband might be a government agent. That was new. That was scary. We didn't have that in America back then. So I told my friends, I said, I'm sure I'm going down to do my play. I can't think that my play is so valuable that apartheid will crumble if I don't do it there. What's more, it'll let me see how things are there, and I'll come back and write about it. Before I left, the people at the theater I worked at, the brave, fine people, said, Bob, please don't write anything about this, because if you do, it will only get us into trouble. So I went back and didn't write about it, and all my friends in England who were waiting for me to prove, my political correctness by writing against South Africa, decided I was a phony. That wasn't fun. I went to Vienna to promote a production of Kennedy's Children. It was fine, except they had cast this great big square-jawed Teutonic drag queen in one of the women's roles with no explanation. Still, it was fun. Until the day I was sleeping, when it was time for me to get my check for royalties coming there, and they said, oh, we've used your check to pay for that party we gave you last night, didn't we tell you? I've got to tell you a few of these stories. I went to Caracas to see a production of my play T-Shirts. It was the first gay play done in Venezuela, and the president of Venezuela gave a party for me and said, this great, important event, this is unofficially the first play at the Caracas Theater Festival. I'd never been treated like a world event before. Every celebrity in Venezuela, all the TV stations, everybody came to opening night. It was thrilling. And then I found that someone had neglected to tell the translator it was a comedy. And it was the most tedious hour of theater in history. I practically had to sneak out of the country. My host wouldn't even speak to me in any language. That just gives you an idea. I'm going to skip a lot of stories and tell you about a specific day in my life in London to show you. I reacted badly to success. I was not ready for it. I was not made for it. Okay? I lived in a room above the King's Head, the pub that did the play, in a room that was used to store potatoes and coal. I didn't move after the play hit. Why should I? I hated my life anyway. I woke from my drunk of the night before about noon. I stumbled downstairs. I stumbled down to Piccadilly Circus, the center of London, to see a play. I caught a matinee of a play called John, Paul, George, and Ringo, a wonderful play about the Beatles that never made it here. At intermission, the manager came over to me and asked if I could please leave and come back for an evening performance sometime, and I said, fine. He said, see, I was in all the papers at that time. He said, your appearance here at a matinee where mostly proletarian people come is causing such excitement that the whispering is disturbing the actors. I said, okay. So I left from outside, and I got on a bus to go back. He said, a bunch of schoolboys got on the bus and saw me and said, oh, there's the famous fellow. Ran over to my side of the bus, and the ticket taker, the conductor, asked me to get off the bus because it was in danger of toppling over from the boys' attention. She said, really, sir, you should take taxis. I got downstairs. I walked back, having nothing else to do. I killed time by walking back to King's Head. I crossed Leicester Square, where there was a newsstand with my picture on the cover of magazines. And from like anything else, I saw a matinee of Barbra Streisand and Funny Lady, the worst movie she ever made. I saw it about 15 times that month on similar days. I even sat through the after feature Jersey, Isle of Contrasts. I went to the King's Head bar. Not to the Arts Theater, where Kennedy's Children had moved by that time. And they have bars in theaters there. I guess they do in New York now, too, don't they? They have bars in theaters. Anyway, they had bars in theaters. And I went to the bar to start my evening drinking. And I heard a voice beside me, a lovely voice, order some drinks. And I turned and looked, and there was the loveliest human being I've ever seen in my life. Like a human doe, a red-haired, green-eyed dough. And I was filled with one of those magical moments. I said, Miss, I don't know if you're an actress or not, but even if you're not, you have such magnetism and power and beauty, charisma. I would love to direct you in a production of Joan of Arc, because anyone would follow you anywhere. And I really felt this would give meaning to my empty life. And she said, oh, I wish it were so. And then someone yelled, hey, Vanessa! Where are the drinks? It was Vanessa Redgrave. She's more beautiful than she photographs. That's why I didn't recognize her. And she turned and wistfully walked over to a bunch of people who, as it turned out, what they were planning was to close my show. In protest against something or other, Vanessa went backstage at intermission at Kennedy's Children that night and tried to persuade the actors to walk out. One of them said, oh, Vanessa, for God's sake, and threw her down 2 flights of stairs. I did not know this was happening because I was attending some big celebrity party. For what in the world, I have no idea. I think it was Tom Stoppard's birthday. I gave him an obscene calendar, and it happened there were people photographing everything at the party. They photographed him unrolling the obscene calendar, and it was in all the papers the next day. So that gives you a very bad reputation in England. So that was a bad thing. And Tom, of course, just said, oh, how did you know? I talked to John Cleese because he and I were the only tall people. And we happened to share an agent and knew each other. So we said, the next day the columns all accused me of trying to seduce John Cleese. Actually, they said playing Romeo to John Cleese's Juliet. I suppose I was supposed to climb up his balcony, I don't know. And that wasn't a very good thing to have said about you in London at the time. And the next day I heard about Vanessa's accident. And the next day, as I came out of seeing Funny Lady and Jersey out of contrast yet again, headed for baby drinking, I passed Vanessa, who was strolling around, covered with bruises and bandages, I suppose looking for another show to close. That was what fame was like for me, okay? So, you will understand why, as soon as possible, I found something else to do with my life. I used the fame. I keep using that word, but there's no other word that it gave me, the temporary fame that it lent me, to affiliate myself with the International Thespian Society, a high school theater organization for which I traveled to over 1,000 schools in the next 10 years. I went around promoting high school theater, which is, after all, most of the theater in this country. And it's terribly important, and it's terribly neglected, and all it has become really is a branch of Broadway. They do Neil Simon, they do Godspell, I mean, those are fine shows, but if that's all the theater you ever saw, it's no wonder that you don't go see any when you grow up. So I went around trying desperately to get some connection between the new theater and the school. It was a lot of fun. It never happened. After 10 years, when I visited some of these schools 5 or 6 times, they were still doing Hello, Dolly and Charlie Brown, and still saying how brave it was of me and how fine it was of me to come offer another world of theater, And it was all talk, and I gave it up. I was pretty worn out after 10 years of it. In the meantime, and this, first I have to tell you, I wrote for several years. I wrote for a paper here in New York called Other Stages. Does anyone remember it? The first Hallmark paper.
I have them all.
Yes, they're wonderful. I wrote a column called State of the Art, which was the first column ever written by an actual practitioner of off-Broadway about what the day-to-day, moment-to-moment life was like. I loved writing it. It was a lot of fun. But during the years that I was writing it, the paper never got one approving letter. You can look through all of them, Bob. Not one approving letter about me. It only got 2 or 3 complaints, which I'm happy to say were all 3 nonsensical. Okay? But I am told that it ruined me in theater in New York. Okay? I would sit in Phoebe's down the way. People would come by my table, look around, lean and whisper, I agree with what you wrote this week. I'd say, oh, how nice, why don't you write a letter? They'd say, oh, I wouldn't dare. Okay? So I am told, I do not know this for a fact, but I have been told by a number of people that the simple facts about our life off-Broadway that I wrote in that column for several years absolutely wrecked me in theater. Something wrecked me in New York theater. Things began to go very badly for me. Okay? I have a lot of bad things to go from here. I have one great, good thing to go through. I affiliated myself with a lovely troupe of beautiful, young, talented children called the Fourth E, of whom Bonnie Young, raise your hand, Bonnie, and Carol Nelson. The founders are here, and Terry Talley who joined us. Are there any other 4D people here? I really can't see. Okay. We did, I don't know, 24 shows together. We did shows by other people, by members like Ross McLean and Steve Nelson and Terry. And we paid for them by doing plays of mine. Okay? It was a lovely relationship. We worked, for the most part, in a verminous ruin down the block. When I say verminous ruin,
it was.
The top floor had rats and floorboards that you literally could fall through. The second floor had asbestos coming from the ceiling. The ground floor had termites that would swarm out of a hole in the stage and literally cover the stage like glittering black sequins. The bottom floor had maggots in the carpet. But it was ours. It was ours. That is, I had a place where I could do as many shows as I could talk the 4D kids into doing. And I really wanted to be busy because I didn't like life much. I liked art. And they were right. We did fantastic shows. We did some crummy shows, mine. And we did lovely shows, and we did a lot of shows. And, you know, basically they paid for themselves. We came out of it without much damage except a few years older, maybe a few nerves shorter, or a few short nerves.
Bob, would you talk about the Kennedy's Children on Broadway and also the one about Sally Kirkland?
Well, I was going to tell about Shelley. I think there's time.
Okay.
Well, the Kennedy's Children on Broadway, there's only one bad thing to say.
Yeah.
We did it. We opened it in Boston. Everybody told me, "Oh no, this is a show for little cafes like the King's Head or little theaters like the Arts Theater." Bob, I said, "Come on, I write plays. They can be done anywhere." We opened in the enormous operatic-sized Wilbur Theater, and my English agent, who was predicting failure, said, "My God, it can fill any theater." I said, "You bet your ass it can." Shirley Knight was brilliant. Once in your life, you should have a performance that perfectly realized. It was, what can I say? Clive Donner did a brilliant job of taking an essentially static play with, which is all monologues, and with subtle movement, enriching it beautifully. The bad thing, we had only one day in the Schubert Theater before we opened in New York. We found out very quickly why they gave it to us at such low rent. It wasn't, as they said, because it admired the play. It's because it's a lousy theater. You cannot be heard in the Golden Theater. I'm sorry, did I say Schubert Theater? It's Schubert's own. You cannot be heard in the Golden Theater unless you walk down center stage and shout at the audience. All of Clive's beautiful staging simply had to go, and the actors just took turns coming down front and talking. At that, we tore the one preview house up. I mean, the actors were so good. Unfortunately, the opening night audience loved it so much that the actors expected that reaction second night, and when they didn't get it, it kind of stunned them. It was a little limp, opening night. Actually, Don Parker and Barbara Montgomery got better reviews than Shirley for opening night, but as they regained themselves, it soon became clear that Shirley was powerhousing the show, and she got a Tony for it, which she well deserved. When the show went on tour, I was in Seattle directing a company of it at the second stage, and I was setting light cues during the thunderstorm and the phone rang. So I could barely hear what was being said, and they told me Shelley Winters was taking over Barbara Montgomery's role for the tour. I said, "Oh, fine." I didn't know. I said, "Oh, fine." I didn't know why Barbara was leaving, but, I thought Shelley Winters would be fine. And I thought they said Sally Kellerman was taking over the hippie role. Again, I didn't know why Kailani Lee was leaving, but Sally Kellerman was a great actress. Well, so it was fine, and I was busy. A couple of weeks later, I was flying to Europe, and I stopped off in New York to see if my agent had any mail for me or any news. And I called her, and she said, "Oh, get right down to the Golden Theater and see the Shelley Winters Company rehearsing Kennedy's Children." I said, "Shelley Winters Company?" I went down. There was Shelley Winters on stage as an impoverished school teacher in a black Balmain cocktail dress with furs. She also had on stage 2 working telephones so she could keep in touch with her daughter and an ex-husband's family in Italy. She also had a dog and a maid who came and took the dog from her, which was her job to speak. I'm not kidding. Sally Kirkland, not Kellerman, was playing hippie. Now that in itself might have been fine, except Sally had bleach blonde Vidal Sassoon haircut to play this the degraded, demoralized hippie. And Shelley had the director sign a contract that they could all improvise. She said, since it's monologues, we don't have to get cues, and we'll improvise like we do at Actors Studio. Shelley talked about her experiences with Trigby Lee, Dag Hammarskjöld, and her experience in being the only person to create the racial rights movement in America. Sally Kirkland talked entirely about her then affair with Bob Dylan. Morgan Freeman Jr. Have I got his name right? Morgan Freeman Jr., who was, Al Freeman Jr., who was cast as the soldier, had translated the entire role into Ebonics. Farley Granger, who was playing the gay actor, an off-Broadway actor, was wearing a tweed and sweater outfit suitable for an English gentleman, and managed to forget every line suggesting his character was gay. And upstage, beautiful Anne Wedgwood waited until she was sure this pack of loonies had stopped talking. Delicately got off her stool, came down stage, spoke her lines beautifully, and got back up stage for Al to start snapping his fingers, or Farley to start nodding his head, or Shelley to wave her hands and talk about Adlai Stevenson and Mary Martin. Or for Sally to come down and say, I really love Bob's Hollywood Home. I mean, it was a nightmare. Some nights, I could not stop it. It was opening in Chicago. I had worked with the theater in Chicago. I built a reputation in Chicago. This show was going to get fantastic attention. I couldn't stop it. I tried getting Shelley and Farley to learn lines. At first I thought they just wouldn't, then I realized they couldn't. They simply did not know how to memorize lines. It was amazing. I begged Shelley to fake sick and quit the show, and she said, well, Bob, you're making me think you don't want me to be in your play. It was just nightmarish. They opened. Some nights the show ran an hour longer than on Broadway. Some nights it ran an hour shorter, depending on what they took it into their heads to say. It was a nightmare. The reviews, of course, were disastrous. One review said, Shelley Winter's trapped in rambling, repetitious play. After the reviews came out, Shelley suddenly remembered things she had to do in Europe and skipped contract and skipped the country. I sued the producer, he sued Shelley, and there went my American career, if there had been any chance of one. Okay, is that what you wanted to hear? I did not make that up. Okay. I would like to talk. How much time do you have?
5 minutes. Get 5 minutes.
I'm awfully sorry. I'm not going to be able to finish with all the bad things in my life. Let me prepare.
Oh, you can keep on. You can keep going.
Aside from the 4th E Company, the 80s were a very bad time for me. Much of it my own fault. I told you I'd tell about bad things I did to myself. I made a great mistake in 1980. I was hooked up with an agent who was psychopathic. She was contractually tied to a lot of my most popular plays. She wouldn't be bought off. I sold the plays to someone, like let them handle her, on the assumption that I would be writing other plays at least nearly as successful. I didn't. The rose fell out of my teeth. My plays were not commercially successful after 1980, and things got really bad for me financially. I spent a lot of the decade and the 90s sleeping in the light booths of theaters where I worked. Sometimes I'd do a show just because they had a comfortable light booth to sleep in. I was moving. I finally gave all this stuff to the archives at Lincoln Center in La Mama, but I was carrying around ragged boxes full of plays and photos. Bad time. I hope it never showed. Just some of the worst ones. When I was doing my first show with 4th E, I got a call from a theater I worked with in L.A. called the Deja Vu. Its owner was called Smithies, and he said, Bob, why are you doing this to us? I said, I have no idea what you're talking about. He said, well, we're opening T-shirts. I said, yeah, I totally make new T-shirts. He said, well, why are you refusing to sign the equity agreement? I said, I really don't know what you're talking about, and I'm in rehearsal. He said, don't lie to me, Bob. They told us you'd refuse to sign it. They're going to close the show and not let us open. So I called Equity. And I had like with Equity before. I called them about Shelley. They said, oh, honey, she's a star. We can't do anything. So I called, and this guy said, oh, yes, I'm the one that's been calling. I've been meaning to call you. I'll send you this form. I said, okay, fine. And then he said, no, I'll come down. It's too important. I'll come down to where you rehearse. I said, fine. Well, I went out for coffee. For years, I thought he didn't come, but Carol told me that he did drop by and stay just for a second when they said it was gone. I told him, have him call me. Well, understandably, Carol, who was waiting to go on in dress rehearsal of playing Carla and these children, forgot to tell me, which was fine. I understand. I mean, for all I knew, he just hadn't come. It didn't matter anyway, as it turned out. I got another call from Smithies the next day saying, Bob, why have you done this to us? We're having to close the show because you wouldn't sign that agreement. And that's where it rested. An old friend was furious with me because he refused to believe that I simply had not been given the agreement to sign. Well, what I found out years later was, in fact, the Equity man had seen rehearsals of the show, felt it had commercial potential, wanted to option it and produce it himself, and did not want other potential producers to see it, and had arranged to close it. He never intended for him to sign. In fact, for 2 years, he told the actors in the show out in California that he had rights to the show and had them do audition performances for backers. You know, I reported this to Equity. I discovered that he had done similar and worse things to many people. And in fact, the Dramatists Guild, I believe, put out a special issue of their newsletter entirely devoted to things he had done. He still works for Equity. He was never inspired. People wonder why I don't
Who is it?
deal
What's
with
his
it.
name?
Huh? I don't even remember his name now. Huh?
What's his name, Doric?
I don't remember his name. Perfect relationship with the
Right.
the lease.
I remember.
And the company, without my permission, had done it in Los Angeles. The actors, at the first read-through, said, I'm not going to do this place, I'm guidance in it. They never did the performance, they didn't even finish the read-through, but the way the thing went, they had to do it in the lease. They
Right.
had to bring in the Los Angeles cast,
Yeah.
or bring them in as an A-class road company, which is a lot of money.
Right.
I think we had to close.
Right. The relation, Equity has never adjusted to the fact that there is off-Broadway. All its rules are still for the days when the producers were money people and had actors in their power and treated actors badly, and rules were made to protect actors in commercial productions from really rotten criminal producers, okay? Off-Broadway, where the actors are the producers, those rules don't make any sense. I knew an actress who got tired of the audition racket and decided to do my play, My Cup Runneth Over, to showcase herself. And I said, sure. And then she called me and said, Bob, what can I do? Equity is making me pay $350 in case I don't cast myself in the show. I mean, it got that crazy. Well, I mean, the rules don't apply to the situation. That's why it's so crazy. But whenever rules are irrational, they will be enforced by crooked or irrational people. That's the trouble. An irrational setup like that lets in crooks. Do you know what I mean?
That's our government,
right? George Bush.
Yes. Speak directly into the Homeland Security microphone. At one point, I was asked over at Theater New City to sign an equity agreement about a show, and I read it through, and they had modified it. It was no longer asking you to pay the original cast for 100 years if somebody else did the show, and it seemed nonsensical but fair. So I was about to sign it, and then I read the last clause. It said, furthermore, the signer agrees to obey not only the above rules, but any changes or additions equity might make to this code in the future. And I called him and I said, you are aware that no court in the Western world, at least, would hold anyone to a contract that allows you absolute carte blanche over their life. They said, but you see, it's not a contract. It's a letter of agreement. You're right, it is like our contract. Anyway, so a lot of actors bridle if you start criticizing equity, and understand it, because it protects them in the world of commercial theater. But, you know, I saw certain shoulders in the how stiff it when we start talking about this. It doesn't belong off Broadway. It never did. It has nothing to do with it, and it has materially hurt people's lives and careers.
Amen.
I don't know what else to crowd in here. I wanted to talk more about the Fourth E. Can I just say they were wonderful and let it go at that? Okay, I worked with Mark Warren, Mark Richard. I worked briefly with another wonderful couple, Mark Warren and Ozzy Rodriguez, who most of you know, started a company called Dramatic Risks. And I worked with it briefly only because the people who housed them, who thought they were doing a great thing housing this little company, were astonished when the work Mark and Ozzy did was so good that it began to get grant attention and press attention, and they wanted to rewrite their whole arrangement with Mark and Ozzy where they got the money, and Mark and Ozzy were not particularly open to that. Have I got it pretty much straight?
More or less, yeah.
And they left, and you know, but it was a fun company to work with. Terry Talley did my Proof Positive, one of my most popular plays, first at the Dramatic Risk Company.
And they didn't know what to do. They were terrified. The people.
Oh, not Mark and Ozzy.
No,
the other people were absolutely horrified. It had never occurred to them that there might be a homosexual character in a play. It was pretty
with age. With age, yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to. I don't think I ever had much chance of any future career in the commercial theater, but I didn't make many steps because, except for the money, I really hated the world. Like Shirley MacLaine and Julie Newmar came to see Kenny Sherman, and they hurt me. They're both big, strong women, and they both grabbed me and clenched their fingernails in my arm, saying, "Oh, why didn't you make me play Carla?" You know, I mean, I was physically hurt, and I just stayed away from it. It wasn't any fun. The money was fun. The rest of it I didn't like. But I discovered as I offered my new plays to people who were glad to hear from me because I had been on Broadway, they wouldn't even read the plays. They'd say, "What's the matter? Isn't it good enough for Broadway? Is that why you're offering it to us?" I mean, it like, you know, they say once you give something away, you can never sell it again. Well, I discovered what prostitutes learn. Once you sell something, you can never give it away again. I worked for a dreadful company called the Irish Repertory Theatre. Carol did a show for me there. Which may be the second worst company we ever worked for. They were horrible, dreadful people. They practically deserted us as I tried to do the production. They lied. They took days off. They were always drunk. They skipped rehearsals because of the fairies told them it would be bad luck to come. They were opposed to almost any mention of sexuality in the play. And I think they hadn't read it before they did it because it was full of sex. They and the other worst company I'm going to tell about did the same thing to us. I was going to send out publicity. They said, "Oh, no, of course, we'll send that out." So I had the flyers, programs, and press releases made, put them in envelopes, addressed them to all of our huge 4th E press list. After the play opened, I found them lying on it without stamps on them in a desk upstairs. They hadn't wanted to publicize a show done by outsiders. So we got no press, you know, and that was hateful. The same thing happened to us with the press at another theater. What was it called? The New Vic? The Old Vic?
The New Vic.
The New Vic. We were getting a little tired of the treatment we were getting at the Verminous Ruin. Oh, I haven't told them about the lights. For instance, the guy who ran the Verminous Ruin Theater liked the money that our shows brought in, but he didn't like us because we were not him. He wanted to produce shows. He wanted to be like La Mama. And I said, "Well, if you were like La Mama, you'd be down in the basement putting Lysol on the maggots of the carpet." Ellen runs a clean theater. He said, "No, tell me Ellen's secret of how she got so successful with so many grants." I said, Well, she keeps a clean theater. She keeps it in shape. She sees that the artists have what they need. She does everything possible to see that they get audiences and appreciation. He said, well, if you're not going to tell me, you're not going to tell me. All this reached a peak when we came in for the opening of Terry Talley's play Before Caesar, in which I was playing, for some reason, Cicero. I dyed my hair white. I didn't know what else to do. And we discovered all the lights were gone from the theater. We ran to the owner, who said, oh my goodness, they must have been stolen. We stared at him and he said, oh no, I remember now, I took them upstairs. Some were broken and I took them upstairs to fix them. We waited a moment more. He said, well, actually, I rented them out to somebody, but I've got other lights upstairs I'm putting together for you. We followed him up. There were shattered bits and pieces of old lights about. Well, it turned out he had stolen the lights for his own production of a musical about Alexander the Great upstairs. Okay? He attempted to run when we pointed this out to him. I say that I was only threatening to bang his head against a brick wall. Carol says I was going to bang his head against a brick wall, and only her husband Steve stopped me. He says, she says. At any rate, Bonnie Young solved it by calling and ordering the lights we needed from a rental company, paying for them, and then standing behind the manager's back and taking the ticket money from him for both shows until she had gotten the amount she'd spent on the lights. So we decided to look for other places to work. We went, it is too true. We went to the New Vic Theater, okay, where we're doing a play of mine called Spitting Tree. I do not know why the woman who ran the theater let us do it. She obviously didn't like the play and didn't like us. She treated us wretchedly. It was as if we were being punished for anything bad that ever happened to her in her life. I would say she lied to us. We had a photographer who did photographs, a wonderful photographer. She said, no, I got a photographer. Gave us his address. I called him. He came in and took some shots. We never saw the photos. He kept saying, well, what do you want the photos for? I said, promotion for the show. And finally I said to him, look, she says that you take photos for all those shows. He says, I haven't even seen her for a couple of years. And it was like that with several people she said would do the work. Like she didn't trust us to know people who do the work. And she fantasized that she had people who do it, or else she didn't want us to have publicity. We never figured it out. And I go on at length about this because this is the kind of person that more and more I ran into. Strange, weird, sick, neurotic people. It was impossible to tell if they were inept or malevolent. And she too left. I discovered all of our publicity stacked on her desk unstamped. She hadn't sent out a bit of it. It was a terrible experience. Not to mention poor Carol having to act in 1910s clothes with no air conditioning. But more and more I ran into that kind of people to work with. I'm going to tell you just some of the worst stories because we've got to get you out of here. The very worst for me, there weren't any 450 people involved. I did a show called Blues for Boys. I did it twice here in New York and twice in LA with long runs at both places. We ran it for 6 months in an off-off theater here, and anybody who has done off-off knows that to run a show with 12 characters for 6 months off-off Broadway, I was exhausted just from rehearsing replacements. But it was very successful, and we always gave part of the money to the Harvey Milk School for Gay and Lesbian Kids here in New York. I did it once here. My friend Alan Gassman did it once here. I did it twice in LA, where I discovered that the man who ran the theater had in fact not been giving any of the money to the school. Said, "Oh, Bob, I thought you were handling that." It was just really, really depressing, right? And then here in New York, I did my last production of it, the one that ran 6 months and was unbelievably successful and unbelievably exhausting. I took no money from any of these productions, of course. You understand at this point I was, like I said, sleeping in light booths at theaters. But we did raise, over the entire 6 months, we took in about $80,000, of which $8,000, 10%, went to the school. Right? And it wasn't much, but I was very happy to give it to them. The owner of the theater, understandably, took a flat 50% of the take. That left 40%, You didn't know I was going to talk percentages, did you? That left 40% to run the show. I'd promote it, to buy ads, to pay for props, to pay the actors $5 a show. You know, that doesn't sound like much, but for 12 actors, it comes to what, $60? So it's a lot for off Broadway. Okay. I went away. I had to go away. We didn't know the show was going to run 6 months. Couldn't run a year. I had to go away for a couple of weeks for a contractual thing in Denver. When I came back, I discovered that the owner of the theater not only had stolen the other 40%, but had actually taken half of the money meant for the school and had changed it to 5% in her clumsy handwriting in the book. I was pretty appalled. I said, okay, you stole the money. We can't run the show anymore. You stole the money to pay the salaries and buy the ads. But you took half the money from the kids. You know, I was just bugging. She said, well, it's not like I just stole it, Bob. I needed it. And I just realized I was coming up against the kind of people that, I know, I mean, I was very innocent. I was raised among such fantastic, talented, compassionate, caring, honest people that every time I ran into one of these people, it just staggered me. You know, I just couldn't believe somebody would be evil enough to steal from kids. And that and a number of other things just, you know, I guess you've got the situation. I was burned out, bummed out, a real has-been career-wise, and just so depressed by the prospect of future experiences like these. I came to Ellen Stewart and said, Ellen, I want to do one last show. And Ellen gave me La Mama for Hello Bob. Carol was in. Carol played all 12 women. Hello Bob was a play about, is Clarice here?
No, she's not here.
Oh, Clarice directed a wonderful production, Circle Rep. I asked her to direct it here, but she didn't want to. Hello Bob's a play about 23 people that a newly famous playwright meets over the course of his success. Directors, old hippie friends, actors, actresses, hustlers, his boyfriend, producers in the company, school teachers, old friends who now live elsewhere, and finally crazies that he meets on the street in the bus, and relatives who don't know where he is, okay? Just simple monologues, all spoken to an imaginary person called Bob, okay? I loved it. I got it on a videotape. You can see it. If you don't have to take my word that it was a wonderful show. The New York Times reviewed it. There is one scene in it, taken from life, where the New York Times interviewer who interviewed me when Kennedy's Children was about to open on Broadway called me backstage at the Golden Theater before the interview came out. He said, I shouldn't be doing this. It could cost my job, and I'll deny it if you tell anyone. But I was ordered to do a kill job on you in the interview, to make you look like a loony, because the paper is angry because English papers have been criticizing the New York papers for not discovering you, for your having to go to England to be discovered. So the Times has ordered me to make you look like an idiot to get them off the hook. And I said, well, thank you for telling me. He said, if you tell anybody, I'll deny it. So I thought 25 years later, when I did Hello Bob, it was okay to tell the story. So that interviewer is a character in the play, you know, calling me to tell me that. The Times reviewed the play, tucked their review under the chess problem, and said very little besides, the play indicates that Mr. Patrick must be insane. And that was my farewell to theater. I went to live with family in an upstate town in California. I had been away from the real world for 30 years among theater people. I didn't know what had happened in the real world since 1961. I really didn't know. What had before been characterized by ignorance and complacency was now characterized by fear and panic. What the 60s had done outside of a few blocks in New York and a few blocks in San Francisco was scare America to death. And that was the America I stepped into. They were afraid of everything. Just to walk around their house and say, oh, don't stand in front of the microwave, it gives you cancer. Don't eat tuna, it poisons you. Don't, I mean, everything, every move you made. I brought my sister some flowers I picked on a walk, and my brother-in-law said, take those out of the house. Someone might come in that's allergic to them, he gets asthma, and sue me. I mean, there was no moment that wasn't full of fear of poison, lawsuits. There were colored people beginning to move into the suburb my family lived in. My brother-in-law would not let his daughter-in-law come into the house alone. If she came to visit them, she had to stop outside and knock. He would go out and escort her from the car into the house because some of those black men might rape her. Okay? It was hideous. Everything was terror. And it wasn't just that the terror was irrational, it's that it was terror. And after 2 years of it, I was pretty nuts. But I did manage to write a couple of plays. And I discovered nobody wanted my plays. The plays I wrote, I sent out to every theater that had ever done a play of mine, and theaters that hadn't, and nobody would do a play. This is possibly the fault of the plays. They may be rotten. I did send the last play I wrote in 2004, Where Are You, Doric? To Doric Wilson, who at that time wasn't running a theater. Already in 91?
Oh, yeah. Oh, 91? Oh, 91, no.
Yeah.
You didn't send me Hollywood Sunset 91.
Well, whenever I sent it.
2000.
Oh, okay. Well, okay, I didn't send it to you because you weren't running the theater. Have your own Coffee House Chronicles. Tell the truth. At any rate, I sent it. In 2004, Hollywood at Sunset, which I considered the best play I'd ever written, and I think Mr. Childs and Mr. Wilson might agree, finally got done in 2004. In fact, it received an award for the best production in 2004. This is a play I wrote in 1994. It is not that I am not monumentally grateful to Tosis II for doing it. It's simply that where was the rest of the world for 10 years? And I grew up where I would walk in and say, Joe, I got a play. He'd say, fine, open Tuesday. Or I'd walk in and Speedy Hartman would say, some play's not going to show up Friday. And I'd say, fine, who's here? I'll write one for them. Or I could always go to Ellen Stewart and he'd say, Ellen, I want a date for a play. Or she'd say, Mr. Patrick, those nice people from Columbia can't make it. Have you got a show? You know, 10 years, I can't take it. I'm not built for it. So I dropped out of theater. For a while I worked in PR in LA. For a while I ghosted movies and TV shows. And that work ran out. And now I review what are called adult videos for a living. It's great. I stay at home. They mail me DVDs. I write reviews. You know, I work for 3 companies. One of them pays me to write the reviews. The others just give me the DVDs. So I sell the DVDs to the local video store. It's a sparse living, but it's steady. And I find that I was right all along. I never really belonged in theater. I was very happy to stay in it, and I worked as hard as I had to stay in it because I love you people. I love people who do belong in theater. I love your imagination and your courage and the importance of what you do in molding people's minds and creating in the most vivid way possible through live action images of hope and promise and beauty. And I'm very happy knowing all of you. I am probably more comfortable no longer being one of you. I really was meant to live at home and be a school teacher or an editor or a reviewer or something, because I'm really happier. But I miss you all, and I was going to sing another song, you know, but we don't have time.
Sing it.
Oh, you don't know what you're doing till you do it. You don't know what you're getting into till you've gotten to it. You don't know what you're trying for until you've tried and won. You don't know what you're doing till you're done. You don't know what it's like till you've been through it. You don't know what you're doing till you do it. You don't know if you've made a strike or if you've made a score. And you don't remember doing it before. But when you hear those people shouting, then you're done with all your doubting, 'cause you realize it's you they're shouting for. They want to see you out there doing it some more and some more. Oh, you never know just what you're doing, do ya? You never know just what you've got until it's gotten to ya. You never know what fun's about until you're making fun. You don't know what you're doing till you've done one. You don't know what you're doing till you do, but you don't know what, shit. You don't know what it is, but you pursue it. You don't know what you're doing till you do it. You never know how far you go until you come back in. You don't know where it's at until you've been. And you don't know how to do it till they tell you that you blew it. And you suddenly yell, screw it all, and then, though your face and feet are aching, and your heart and back are breaking, still you realize it's taking 20 men just to hold you back from doing it again. I hope reincarnation is a fact and not a myth, even if I come back named John Smith, 'cause I love what I'm doing. Yeah. I love what I'm doing. Yeah. Long as I got you to do it with.
Did you get it? You get it?
Thank you, my darlings.
So much. You're wonderful.
Yes, I suspect we're going to Phoebe's.
Michael.
I'll see you there.
And in 2 weeks for showing.
Yes, come see Rochelle.
Come see Rochelle. It's
She's
me.
a great talker.
When you come here, Charba,